Okay, good morning, people. Welcome to Thursday. As you can see, if you're in Vancouver, it's raining, which is so great because it's been so warm in this apartment for 2 weeks, and now it's almost a normal temperature in here. So awesome. I'm happy to see the rain back. Um, yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, couple things I'll say. So today we'll kind of tie up Rome. We'll finish it. I'm not sure exactly where I'll end it. I think I know where I'm going to end it, but you know, the thread of Roman history actually almost extends into the modern day, and so you could cut it off at all sorts of different areas. And I'm not sure how far I'll go. Probably not too much further. Um, but we'll definitely make an end of Rome today, and then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll just try to summarize a few of the things that we have seen in this course as best we can in a short period of time, because we've been studying this stuff for 3 months, right? So we'll do that. The other thing I'll mention too is that you know, in terms of grades and marks and things, in the in the context of like student portal and marking things, I just wanted you to know that I always have a backup. And so there's stuff on student portal, and that's mostly for you. But most of my marks are on an Excel spreadsheet, which is on my computer. And so when I go to submit final grades, I always cross-check the two against each other. And so in most cases, the grades are pretty similar. And so I usually give you the higher one. So if my spreadsheet says, 72 and student portal says 74, then I just leave it at 74. I don't change it. And similarly, if it's the other way around, if my spreadsheet says 74 and student portal says 72, I will give you the 74. So I always kind of give you the better rounding, however that works out. But again, that Excel spreadsheet also gives me a backup as well. So if I see that, on my Excel spreadsheet, if it says 80% and in student portal it says 60%, I know something's weird and I can investigate and figure out what the problem is. So just so you know, I always have a double check. I always have a way to sort of flag any errors, hopefully. So just so you know that there's a backup version of my grades, and I will I'll cross-check them to make sure that everything is correct. Okay, so who's here? Karen's here. Good morning again, Karen. KC is here. Good morning again, KC. And Tika. Hello again, Tika. Mashid is here again. Hi, Mashid. Aliana is here. Hello. Good morning, Aliana. Good morning to you, Lily. And Cindy, good morning. Ying is here. Good morning, Ying. Shafan is here. Good morning. Jimmy's here. Good morning, Jimmy. As is Carmen. Morning, Carmen. Adalbert's here. Good morning, Adalbert. And Ella. Hello, Ella. And Min is here. Hello, Min. And Jen is here again. Hi, Jenna. Okay. Let's dive in and finish this off. Okay. So we've kind of come to the end of the Roman. We've come to the end of the Roman Republic, right? So we've very quickly followed Rome's trajectory from a monarchy under Etruscan kings through a democratic republic with consuls and senators and assemblies and voting and all sorts of things. And now we're kind of transitioning into a period where all of those things still exist, but they're kind of manipulated by a single ruler. And kind of the focal point for this change is tough to put your finger on. I think they spoke about it in the text that we read either yesterday or the day before, where they said that, it's difficult to know where the Republic ends, right? Was it with Sulla marching on Rome? Was it with Marius's reforms? Was it with Julius Caesar becoming dictator for life? Is it, the rise of Augustus? Where does the Republic really end? And so Historians, debate that fact because that's kind of what historians like to do. But certainly the life and the activities of Julius Caesar are critically important in this death of the Republic period. And so, again, we said that Caesar had entered into a triumvirate with two other guys, Pompey and Crassus. Eventually, he became the last man standing of this triumvirate and the most powerful man in Rome. And so he comes back to Rome after defeating Pompey, or at least after somebody murders Pompey. He comes back and he starts to administer Rome. And from all reports, it seems that Caesar was actually a reasonably good administrator, and he might have been ruling illegally, right? He might have been the sole consul and the dictator for life, and so he might have been ruling the city in an unprecedented way. But from all accounts, he was a reasonably good administrator, and he made a number of important reforms which were beneficial for Rome. He forgave a bunch of his enemies. And so things were actually reasonably stable under Caesar, especially since Rome had been subject to civil wars for decades before Caesar came to power. But of course, there were some who were suspicious of Caesar's ambitions, right? What exactly were his plans? Was he trying to make himself a king or some sort of tyrant ruler over Rome? What was he going to do? And so we said at the Lupercal, Mark Antony tried to put a crown on his head. This little bit of political theater, whatever its purpose was, freaked out some of the senators, and they hatched a plan to murder him. And they did. They stabbed him to death on the floor of the Senate in 44 BCE. And they claimed, of course, that they had restored the Republic. But of course, that was a ridiculous statement because they hadn't done any such thing. All they had done is murder one guy. And in murdering him, they left a power vacuum. Suddenly there was an empty spot where a powerful person had been. And so, of course, everyone was worried about another civil war. And that's exactly what happened. There was a second civil war. And so there was a second triumvirate, which we learned about, with a guy named Lepidus and Mark Antony, Caesar's friend, and Octavian. Octavian, of course, is Caesar's grandnephew and the heir to his name and part of his fortune, right? So this guy, Octavian, a 19-year-old kid, comes out of nowhere, takes up Caesar's name, gets Caesar's army behind him, allies with Mark Antony and Lepidus, and fights a civil war against the Optimates, the senators who assassinated Caesar. They defeat those Optimates, the second triumvirate here. They defeat the Optimates. Lepidus is kind of pushed aside. Antony flees to Egypt, but Octavian pursues him. And Antony commits suicide with his new girlfriend Cleopatra. And then Octavian returns to Rome and says that he has restored the Republic, but it's the Senate's job to keep it that way. And so the Senate begs Octavian, no, don't leave us, stay and help us govern Rome. And so he gains a new title, Augustus, and he gains a bunch of interesting powers that no one person has ever held. And so, because when Octavian comes back to Rome, he's in the same position as Julius Caesar was. He can't crown himself a king, but remaining in the position he is guarantees that he will constantly be fighting wars against other generals who want power as well. What to do, right? And so Octavian is very clever, right? After he gains his army and kills all of his enemies and returns to Rome, he tries to give up his power. But somehow the Senate gives him extra powers and honors anyway. And again, it's not clear what's going on here. It's not clear if Octavian is trying to actually give up his power or if it's all a bit of showmanship, right? We know that sometimes politicians like to lie and make things look different than they are. It's not clear what Octavian was trying to do, but either way, he had a lot of public support. He gained a number of important powers that no one person had ever held before, but held no official office. So he was not officially a member of the Roman government. And so in doing this, he managed to basically make himself the most powerful man in Rome, but not a king, not an emperor, a princeps, a first person, a first man in Roman society. So he was princeps princeps civitatis, the first citizen of the state. And so I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. Yeah, so he kind of ruled off to the side. And so all of the regular parts of the Republic continued to function as well as they had up to that point, maybe a little bit better. But Augustus here was able to manipulate the system the way he wanted it to happen. And so he could veto legislation with his powers of tribune. He could introduce laws with those powers of tribune. If you wanted anything done and you needed money, well, you had to have Augustus's approval because Augustus controlled the treasury. He controlled the money. Sometimes he served as consul when it suited him. He was also head of the military, which ensured that nobody would attack him. And again, he was able to do this without looking like a king or an emperor, because again, he held no title. He was simply princeps civitatis, the first citizen of the state, a role model for Romans, but not a king and not an emperor. We said that Augustus built started a number of important public projects, and so in the Forum he built this Augustan Forum here, which was quite lavish and beautiful. And he started basically a line of, emperors. Eventually they will come to be called that, but of course we know that Augustus is not an emperor. He is a princeps, right? But you can see here that there's a long line of emperors that follow him, and some are good and some are bad. Again, this is the problem with having a single leader in charge of your country or society. When you have a good guy, things go well. When you have a bad guy, not so much. Okay, so before we started, I asked you to think about some of the things that we discussed in the context of Rome. And so is there anything to do with culture and environment that we should remember about Rome? What did you come up with? Okay, that's worth saying. Yeah, so Rome was a very centralized society, right? So the Roman civilization and later the Roman Empire is very intensely focused on the city of Rome itself, both politically, but also culturally and in terms of the sort of mythology and the idea of Rome, right? Rome is not a decentralized place. Rome is one place, right? So think about the Greek world that was very decentralized, right? There were all these kind of independent city-states. Sometimes they fought with each other, sometimes they didn't, and then all of them were kind of different and unique. Here in the Roman world, it was very centralized, right? It was all about Rome. It was all about the city. And so that wasn't so much the physical environment, but Jimmy, that's definitely worth saying. The idea that this was a highly centralized culture, and that city itself was the focal point of the entire civilization and empire in a way that in a way that's pretty distinctive. Yeah, that's worth saying. What else did you say? Anything else? We didn't actually talk too much about the physical environment, and I think that we probably didn't do that because Rome, I think, was not so much shaped by its physical environment the same way that other civilizations were. So again, when you think about Egypt, for instance, Egypt was very much shaped by its physical geography, right? The fact that it was entirely desert, except for this one river that basically gives life to agriculture and to a civilization, right? And so Egyptian culture is heavily shaped by the environment they live in because it's such an extreme environment. Rome is shaped by its geography to a much lesser degree, right? We hear a little bit about the hills, right? There's the Capitoline Hill and the Palatine Hill and things like that, the Aventine Hill, but that's kind of it, right? The physical geography isn't as important to Rome as the physical geography in other cultures is. Oh yeah, nothing to say here, right? Nothing to say about politics or power or authority or governance. I feel like basically all we've talked about in Rome is these topics. So there's a lot to say here. But what did you say? Okay, so KC says Roman citizens were divided into two orders. Oh yeah, plebeians and patricians, right. So we have a kind of a two-level social structure here that starts off the empire. The patricians, who are kind of the upper class, and they are descendants of the original Roman senators, the first Roman Senate that is established by the Etruscan king. I think it's Servius Tullius. The first Senate that's established, the descendants of that Senate are the patricians, right? And plebeians are kind of everyone else. So we have these two levels of society. Yeah, that's good. Jimmy says the Senate occupies a high position in the government. Yes. So the Romans have a Senate, and it's kind of the first piece of their republican government. So even when they're still, we didn't talk about this very much, but even when Rome is still under the control of an Etruscan king, they actually have a Senate. The king establishes the Senate in order to give people a voice in government. And so the Senate is an important part of Rome. And in fact, I don't know if you've ever seen, but if you look at artwork or movies that feature Roman soldiers, you'll see they carry a banner and it says SPQR on it, and that's an abbreviation, a Latin abbreviation for Senatus Populus que Romana, SPQR. So the Senate and the people of Rome, and so the Senate comes first, right? And so Jimmy, you're very right in pointing out the Senate is an important part of the Roman government. Even before the Republic, the Senate exists. Casey says there's this cursus honorum, right? There's kind of a political ladder that you need to climb in terms of gaining political power in Rome, right? So yeah, it's a ladder of political sequence where you get elected to certain offices, you hold them for a year, and that allows you to rise up the ladder, but it also keeps people from gaining too much power, right? Because you just can't gain too much power in the space of a year, right? It's just not enough time. Yeah, that's all good. Whoops. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Look at that. Whoa. Interesting. Casey also says there's the Pontifex Maximus. So, did that get smaller? Pontifex Maximus. So that's another position you can be elected to in Roman society. It's kind of the high priest of Rome, responsible for a bunch of rituals. Very important and very politically connected. Yeah. What else? There's more. There's tons more. I guess we could say that basically when Rome becomes a republic, the power of the kings is transferred to two consuls, right? And those consuls are important because they kind of hold the power of the king, but they hold it in two people, right? And so those two people have to agree with each other in order to make any decisions, right? And again, it keeps one person from becoming too powerful. And maybe that's something we could say too, is that the Romans have a very strong suspicion of kings, of monarchs, right? So the Romans don't like the idea of one person having all the power. Ooh, it's really raining out there. The Latin word for king, rex, is actually like a p, like it's like a bad word. It's like you want to spit after you say it. Rex. Ugh. So the Romans have a really strong aversion to monarchy, to the rule of a king. I guess maybe the other thing I'll say about politics before we move on is that one of the things we saw in this section, in this module, is that the political rules that exist in order to keep people from gaining too much power, eventually those rules start to break down, right? People start to ignore them. People start to use the military to just take whatever they want, and that kind of brings about, in part, that brings about the end of this republic, right? When people stop following the rules, when people stop respecting tradition, when people decide they're just going to take whatever they want, that's when things start to really go downhill for Rome. Of course, there's other issues that are involved as well, but that's one of them. What did you say for interactions and exchanges? You say for interactions and exchanges. We didn't get into this too heavily either. But there's some things that we could say. There's some things that we could say. I feel like this was bigger before. I wonder what's... Okay. Interesting. Okay, so Jimmy says, yeah, the Roman Empire was crisscrossed with trade routes. That's very true, right? So the Romans, one of the things we didn't really talk about but could have is that as the Romans expanded their empire, one of the things they did was they actually built roads. They built really well-constructed, wide stone roads that extended all the way through the empire. And so this was a very beneficial thing. This was a beneficial aspect of being part of the Roman Empire, is that they built roads for you, and you could use those roads to travel, but more importantly to trade, right? So these roads facilitated trade and improved the economies of really everyone in the Roman Empire, because they had these highways over which to trade. Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true. Sorry, that's noisy. Conflicts and conflict resolution. What did we learn about that? Seems like it's garbage day. Garbage day every day here. There's definitely stuff to say here. Okay, so KC says, where does she say? Yeah, so she says there's civil war, right? There's conflicts between generals, and in particular here we have a conflict between Caesar and Pompey, right? Two powerful Roman generals. They fight a civil war, and eventually Caesar wins it, right? And poor Pompey is assassinated at the hands of Ptolemy the 13th, right? So we have these kind of international conflicts, these international civil wars between very powerful men, right? And it's probably worth stating that, you know, these conflicts took a long time, right? These civil wars went on for years between these two, and so they're not over in 2 weeks. They take a long time. So there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of warfare, and a lot of resources go into fighting these civil wars between powerful Romans. What else, guys? Anything else? Conflicts and conflict resolution. Yeah, you know, most of what we see in this unit is conflict between Roman generals, right? Between powerful Romans. And for a long time, those conflicts get resolved militarily, right? All the way up until Augustus, right? And Augustus manages to... It's a little windy. Augustus manages to... Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to fix that. It's noisy. That should be better. Okay. Um, yeah, for a long time, those conflicts seem to be resolved with military force, right? So they fight a war to sort it out. Up until Augustus, right, who at first uses warfare to get rid of all of his rivals. But then he very artfully or craftily manipulates the machinery of the republic to his own ends, right? So he kind of stands back. He has no official position, but he has certain powers and he can get the republic to do whatever he wants it to do, right? He's just got kind of one finger on the steering wheel and he's able to steer the republic where he wants it to go. Okay, last one, values and beliefs. What did we talk about in terms of values and beliefs? Come on, there's 12 people here. I should see 12 answers, not just one. There's the one. KC. Right. We said that the Romans had a strong respect for the past and for tradition, right? And they were averse to change. And this is kind of true and kind of not. And we didn't have a ton of time to get into it. But in terms of their social values, in terms of family and honor and duty, those were very conservative values, and the Romans didn't like change in that regard. And so in terms of their social values, they were very conservative, but in other ways they were actually very innovative. And so we didn't get a chance to talk about this very much, but the Romans, as they kind of expanded their empire, they absorbed technologies and ways of doing things from other societies, right? So they borrowed heavily from the Greeks in terms of architecture and art and literature and theater and religion. They borrowed from the Etruscans. The Carthaginians, when they were fighting those Punic Wars, they learned how to make ships from the Carthaginians. They copied them in order to wage war with them. So technologically speaking, one of the ways you might want to think about Rome is if anyone's seen Black Panther, Rome was very much like the Wakandans in this way. So Wakanda is kind of a very traditional society in terms of how Wakanda is ruled and sort of the social values around the Wakandan people. But technologically speaking, they're very advanced, right? They do lots of experiments and they are very innovative. And so the Romans were kind of like that as well. They were very conservatively minded in a social way, but technologically speaking, they were very innovative. They believed that innovation is a sign of disrespect to their ancestors. Yes, socially, definitely. Technologically, not so much. The Romans were very open to a good idea if they saw one, and so, but again, not so much socially. Yes, that's true, but it depends on. That's somewhat true, Jimmy, but it depends on the time period you're talking about. Gods and goddesses, yes, the Romans had them. Most of them are borrowed from the Greeks and sort of renamed. Yeah, exactly. They had the same gods as the Greeks, many of the same gods, but they renamed them with Roman names. Yes, all of that is true there, Jimmy. They worship gods, had to do with the earth and the sky and the sun and the sea. Some of the gods are Jupiter, Mars, Neptune, yes. And we see, men were more important then women, and democracy was important and crucial. Yes. So in the Republican period, the Romans are very dedicated to the idea of the Republic and the idea of Rome. And yeah, that idea of democracy and republic gets woven into their sort of narrative of who they think they are. And also, you're very right, Karen, that there's a disparity in terms of men and women, in terms of their roles in society and their amount of power. And so, men, of course, had the power. Men were the ones who were conducting business. Men were the ones who were participating in government. Men were the ones who owned things, and men were in charge of the family, right? The paterfamilias is the head of the family, and the father is really in charge, and everybody does what the paterfamilias says, right? For women, they had a little bit of a different existence, right? Probably a little bit more freedom than Greek women had. But again, they were not really a part of political life or economic life. Their sphere was the home, right? They were responsible for the home, for looking after children, for raising them. Yeah, so we have kind of very different roles for men and women in society. Okay, good, good. All right, let's take a little break. Come back in 10 minutes and we will wrap up this whole Rome thing. Okay, so see you in 10. Okay, people, and we're back. So let's finish Rome, okay? Like I said, we've just looked at one kind of an exciting period of Roman history where this tiny little backwater town that's ruled by the Etruscans throws out their kings, creates this republic, builds an empire, and then their democratic republic kind of crumbles, and eventually they're taken over by a single ruler, and they become kind of a fully fledged empire. Of course, that empire will persist for hundreds of years later, and of course will be influential in the modern world. But let me just take you through a little bit of that, just so we can kind of get some closure here and put an end on this story. So, like I mentioned, there's a long succession of Roman emperors, right? And they start off with Augustus, who's not an emperor, but he's succeeded by Tiberius, who is a guy he's an okay princeps, but he doesn't really want to be in that title. There's Caligula, who by all accounts was a morally awful person. And so, the quality of emperors kind of varies over time. Some of them are good, some of them are awful, some of them are mentally ill, some of them are good administrators, some of them are very poor administrators. And so, again, the strength of the empire really relies on the strength of the emperor. And again, these emperors kind of vary in quality over the years. Eventually, what's going to happen here is that the empire will be split into two pieces, okay? And so you can see here that eventually the Roman Empire will expand to encompass all of kind of Western Europe, so what's now France and Spain and Italy. Parts of what's now England will be under the control of the Romans, not to mention North Africa and Egypt and the Levant, which is now kind of Israel, Palestine, most of Turkey, all of Greece. All of these areas will be under the control of Rome, but they'll be too much to deal with. It's just the empire is too large. And so it'll eventually be split into a Western and an Eastern empire. Okay. So the Roman Empire has become too large for one person to manage. Power is in the hands of a small group of people who cannot really make all of the decisions that are needed. We still have a big gap between rich and poor in Rome that is really never resolved. And again, we have a series of poor and not poor, but weak or mentally ill or inferior emperors. I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. And finally, what happens is that Diocletian, who's an emperor, will split the empire in two, a Western and an Eastern empire. And so the Eastern Empire will continue on, and eventually it will adopt Christianity as its state religion. And so Christianity will get a huge boost from the Eastern Empire when Constantine makes it the official state religion in 312 CE. As for the Western Empire, As for the Western Empire, it's slowly going to fade in importance. And so for a while, we have an Eastern and a Western Empire. The Western Empire will have Rome as its capital. The Eastern Empire will be ruled from what's now Istanbul, but at the time was called Byzantium. Later, it will be called Constantinople after Constantine. And then once the Ottoman Turks take over that part of the empire, they'll rename it Istanbul. But its original title is Byzantium. And so what happens is that the Eastern Empire becomes more important, more rich. There's more going on in that part of the world. And the Western Empire that's centered in Rome slowly becomes less and less important. And so, economy, trade, all the exciting stuff is kind of happening in the Eastern Empire. And so, the Western Empire slowly fades in importance. People don't really pay attention to it anymore. Rome becomes less important, and eventually it is basically taken over by barbarians, and it's conquered, it's sacked, and so people steal all the good stuff and burn things to the ground, and so it kind of ceases being important. And so the empire is kind of split in two, and then the western part kind of crumbles away and is eventually overtaken by all kinds of European peoples, whereas the Eastern Empire continues to flourish, into the Middle Ages. What else can I show you here? Yeah, so this is kind of what happens to the western part of the empire. Again, there's all of these different peoples running around Europe. There's Visigoths and Vandals and Angles and Saxons and Franks and Ostrogoths and Lombards, and all of them are looking for land. And so they conquer the western part of the empire. And finally, a Germanic leader called Odoacer, he's the one who overthrows the final Western Roman emperor in 476 CE, who is interestingly called Romulus. So the whole thing, the western part of Rome, starts with a Romulus and ends with another Romulus. And so again, the western part of the empire kind of falls away. But the eastern part, the Byzantine Empire, continues to thrive all the way through this period. And so again, there's a few, I've got some extra slides in here because usually I spend more time on this, but one of the sort of jewels of the Eastern Empire here is the Hagia Sophia. Originally it's built by Justinian, who is a Christian emperor who follows Constantine. So it starts out its life as a Christian church. Later on, Hagia Sophia will become a mosque once the Ottoman Turks take over the Byzantine Empire. Then it becomes a museum, but very recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Turkey's President Erdogan changed it back to a mosque, and so this building is now a mosque. That's it inside, by the way. So this part of the empire, this eastern part of the Roman Empire, will be in existence until 1453, and when it's finally taken over by the Ottoman Turks. And the Ottoman Empire will last all the way until partway through World War I, which is in the early 1910s. So this part of the Roman Empire actually has a very long lifespan and almost continues into the modern world almost. But of course, the Western Empire will be taken over and it will collapse. We have the Middle Ages that happen, which I won't say too much about because we don't have time for it. But what I will say is that a lot of the ideas that come out of Greece and Rome in terms of art, architecture, literature, theater, religion, all of those things are revived during the Italian Renaissance from the 14th to the 17th century. And so all of those sort of Greek and Roman ideas are kind of rediscovered during the Renaissance. And so we see them expressed in a number of different ways. And so here's a couple of, on the left here, you can see Michelangelo's David, very much sculpted in the Greek tradition, right? And so Michelangelo is kind of copying the Greek style that comes before. Similarly, the one on the right I think is Donatello, a Renaissance sculptor. But here we have the Greek myth of Perseus, and he has the head of the Medusa. And so not only is the artistic style being copied, but the subject matter is being copied as well. We have Renaissance artists painting scenes from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. This is Plato's Academy. Remember Plato, one of Athens' philosophers, the student of Socrates? Plato opened an academy, and so here we have, I forget the Renaissance artist here, but here we have an artist's depiction of the academy in ancient Athens. And so again, these Greek and Roman ideas are experiencing a rebirth 1,000 years later. Here's Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, right? So here we have a Greek myth of Aphrodite reimagined by the Romans and named Venus. And then here we have a Renaissance painter painting this ancient myth here in the 1400s. Of course, we have Leonardo da Vinci's classic Mona Lisa, also from this period. And during the Renaissance, people start to explore the philosophical ideas that came out of Greece and Rome as well, right? And so we have thoughts about the nature of the universe and humanity and ethics and morals. We have a lot of technological innovation going on. This is a water wheel designed by Leonardo da Vinci. And those ideas, the ideas that reappear in the Renaissance, find their way into the Enlightenment. And so the Enlightenment is a period in 18th century Europe where a lot of those ideas that came to us from ancient Greece, the ideas about liberty and government and reason and logic, democracy, all of those ideas are kind of reborn during the Enlightenment. And so Enlightenment thinkers like this guy here, Thomas Hobbes, and this guy here, who I'm just going to call Montesquieu because he has the longest name ever. These guys lay the foundations for the political and the rational world that we currently live in, based on what comes to us from Rome and from Greece before it. And so those ideas that came all the way from the ancient world and filtered their way through Rome and then were kept alive during the Eastern Empire, during the Byzantine Empire, and then resurfaced in the Renaissance, and then were kind of reimagined in the Enlightenment. Those ideas serve as the basis for our modern Western world. And so from a Western perspective anyway, the fact that we have democracy and constitutional government and the separation of church and state and science and philosophy and logic and rationalism, human rights, all of those ideas that are a major part of how Western countries and many other countries around the world operate today, those ideas come to us from the Enlightenment in Europe. And again, those ideas come from the Renaissance. Those ideas come from the Byzantine Empire, which come to us from Rome, which come to us from Greece, right? So there's a very long kind of circuitous path, but many of the things that are important tenets of the way we live our life here in the West are actually very ancient, and they've come to us, they've been passed down to us for centuries through various cultures and through various empires. Okay, so that's quite a story, eh? I'm sorry we don't have time to sort of dig more into that. It's obviously a fascinating story, but from the time of Augustus, which is about let's say 30 CE to the Enlightenment is a period of about 1,500 years. And so it's a long period of history to trace those ideas, and we don't really have time to do it. But it is quite a fascinating story. And so maybe what I'll ask you now is, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? I am here to answer them. After all that, KC, you have no questions? It's okay. I'm just kidding. Okay, no questions? Other people? Okay, so Karen says no. Sheed says no. Curly says no. Jimmy says no. Okay, so what I will do then is I'll end it here. Tomorrow we will do a bit of a wrap up. We'll try to connect some of the ideas that we've talked about in this course, hopefully in a way that makes some sort of sense. Because of course we've been on quite a journey. We've been through thousands of years of history, and we've been we've been all different places within the globe. We didn't quite get to everything I wanted to get to, but there's always more, right? World history and the study of world cultures is an immense field. We'll never be able to get to everything. But yeah, so maybe what I'll do is, if there's no questions, which it appears there is not, I will leave it there. Come back tomorrow. We'll try to tie this up in a nice little ball, and then and then you all will be done. Okay, so that's it for today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll finish this thing. Okay, so that's it. See you tomorrow. Thank you for participating there in the live chat. Good work. Yeah, bye.